Hello, everybody on the internet. Welcome to today's edition of Open Circuit. It's episode 14 already. We've only been doing this for not even 3 weeks, but that happens when you go live every weekday at 2 p.m. from our super secret location here at EdVideo 404 York Road, Guelph, Ontario, Canada. My name's Scott. I'm the program director at EdVideo. During these times, we just thought we'd try to keep the art and the media art flowing and do what we can. We have the equipment to do live streaming. So we thought, why not? I know a lot of artists with a lot of great work, and it's exciting to talk to them about their ideas, show some of their work. Today's special guest is a dear friend of mine, Fezz Stenton. We're going to get to talking to Fezz soon. But first, we're just going to talk about a few other things that are in the works, that are upcoming, just a few thoughts and things like that. One thing that we like to do is try to announce our upcoming guests. Normally, Edie's here with me, sitting right here. She's still away. She's got other obligations. She is a busy kid, so she should be back tomorrow or Monday, back with her video game reviews, which Fezz was disappointed not to have as part of his show today. Also, one other thing I'm going to mention is I'm having a few computer issues today. Normally I do the playback of the slides and video from a 10-year-old MacBook Pro. Today it's just choking. It's beach balling, if you will, a bit more than I'm comfortable with. So I'm going to be trying to switch the sources on my main laptop with Fezz and the slides from Keynote, which I use. Just trying to figure this out every day, trying to make the system a little better. Hope you like that intro. Did something a little different today. That was a vintage clip that Fezz put on YouTube years ago. It's from a performance at EdVideo Gallery when we were back at 40 Baker Street and had our own gallery. It's from January 29th, 2011, coming up to a decade-old clip of live action Fezz, which we're going to talk about today with Fezz, some of his musical projects, but mostly we're going to focus on his video projects. That edition of Live Action Fezz featured on the turntable and effects Cadillac, as he was known at that time. Now he goes around town known as Squeezy, amongst other names. Wonderful man who's always been involved with that video, a great supporter. Also, a special performance on cello by Ian Gibbons during that. And that camera work was done by Josh Clemenson, who also has had exhibitions through Ed Video in the past. Let's talk about our upcoming guests. Here we go. Tomorrow, April 24th. It's a surprise show, and what that means is I still don't know what I'm going to do. I have a few ideas for some things. If anyone's watching right now and wants to weigh in with some ideas, one idea I thought of on my walk here, I walked here today, it's about 5 kilometers. I thought maybe do a feature about some special places in Guelph, special buildings and sites of importance that maybe are not that well known. I had another idea maybe to do a demonstration of self-tattooing that I would do. So it'd be like a YouTube video about how to tattoo from a guy who's only learned how to do tattoos from other YouTube videos. We'll see. I'll figure out something tonight, and we'll have a plan for tomorrow's show. But then on Monday, Alejandro Garcia Contreras joins us from his residency in Chiapas, Mexico. April 28th, Robert Dayton, who's in BC right now, talking about his career in music and art and books and other things. May 1st, from right here in Guelph, we have Versa, Alex and Monica doing live visuals and sound with great success, talking about how that came to be and what they're doing right now. May 4th, Julie Ferranda from Glasgow, Scotland. I said Edinburgh yesterday, and it's only because I slightly prefer Edinburgh to Glasgow, but she's actually in Glasgow, where she's currently living. Going to talk to us about her work. And May 5th, Dustin Seabrook. Very excited to talk to him. He's down in Woodstock, Ontario, I do believe. He's making project isolation videos, basically getting people to send him footage of what they've been up to during these strange times and making these really beautiful series of videos. Then May 6th, Corey Steckel from right here in Guelph talking about his collage work primarily and what drives him to get up very early each day and pursue what he does. So let's take a look here. So today I was very excited that Fezz Stenton was willing to talk to me. I've known him for about I'd say 12 or 14 years, since he was just a young man, figuring it out, playing music like we saw in that intro, and getting really into video over time. He's one of the best video people I've ever met, actually. It's a real treat to talk to him each time about his projects. He's really on the cusp of some exciting things, and we're going to kind of go through that and talk to him today. So let's see what we can figure out here with our one laptop setup, and let's see if we can find Fezz. Are you there, Fezz, on Zoom?
Hello.
Hello, Fezz. We can see you. We can hear you. How is it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Well, it's a real treat. I'm very excited to talk to you about your work, because what you do by far eclipses what I even can comprehend, and so I'm very interested to hear about all of your different projects and how you approach video overall. So before we get going, just tell us a little bit about where are you, what you've been doing in the last 6 weeks, and how you feeling.
Yeah, I'm in Toronto. I've actually just moved in the last couple of weeks to a better place to be isolating, and things are good. I've never had more tech in my own home. I've always had a lot of gear, but this is definitely peak gear for me. Brought all the things that I'd be using at my studio on Queen West at Occupied VR into this basement in East York, where I'm now building a little virtual studio and continuing to work. I'm one of the lucky ones that can still, get his work done remotely. So yeah, I'm feeling really fortunate, given what's happening.
That's awesome. Before we get really into it, I like to ask us. I don't know why, but I like to ask them about their like really early experiences with art, and for you in particular, maybe with music or technology. Do you have any early memories of things that maybe nudged you into pursuing it or taking it seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my parents were very supportive of any creative endeavors I had growing up. My dad was an optical engineer. Worked for companies like Leica, a parent company of a smaller company here in Midland, Ontario. My mom was a ballet dancer, so I grew up kind of dancing. I had piano lessons from the age of 3, and they were really supportive of like fine art and art lessons when I showed interest in drawing. So I always sort of knew I was headed in some sort of creative field. Um, but I think it was what got me really into the world of video early on was a family business that my dad set up for us, where we were shooting wedding videos and talent shows, with these old Sony DV cams, and I was editing on Matrox, like old school Premiere, version 2, I think. I learned how to edit video based off of tutorials that were on like 16 VHS cassettes, and uh, I think I was like maybe 12 or 13 when we were doing this. So I think my dad giving me that introduction to the Adobe suite so early on gave me that edge to work in it. And when I came to Guelph, I worked for an ad company there, and it became a clear form of expression for me, something that I could do, um, just through experimentation. So I was lucky that I had that technical back end like at such a young age.
Well, let's talk about how that maybe also played into, before we really dive into your video work, I'd love to back it up and talk a little bit about your music projects. I mean, that's kind of what you're doing a lot of when I met you. I used to play, as we saw in that intro, at Ed Video all the time. How maybe, and there's also like, well, every project I've seen you is kind of electronic based. Talking about maybe about your live action Fezz project, even playing with Green Go or any other early things. And I'm going to play a video in the background, very vintage, over 10 years old, of you jamming it out in another basement with your gear as you talk.
Wow, there's some deep cuts here. I like it. Um, so I came to Guelph wanting to start a band. Like I had an album that I wrote living as an exchange student in Brazil, of just random songs I made with Fruity Loops and Adobe Audition, and um, yeah, just came to the city thinking like, okay, this is where I'm gonna find my people to start a band with, and I'm gonna do that, and that really worked out. I met like a great community of people in Guelph, at Kazoo, and just Burnt Oak Records, and Daydream Nation, a record store. There's just like really great people that I fit in with right away, and the band members just sort of like they found themselves in a way. It just kind of happened naturally, and luckily I was able to have a couple of great years, playing shows with some friends, and we were able to play Hillside Festival and tour around Ontario and Quebec. So yeah, it was a great time, and I think that experience of doing a lot of live performance on stage really helped inform my later transition into moving more into video. So yeah, and then live action Fez was just more of an experimental electronic thing that I did on my own, and was sort of my transition after Gringo, and yeah, it was just like really kind of a limitless, fun way to experiment with software and beat making and that. So yeah, I owe a lot of like my hours of learning how to use Ableton really well. That all that stuff transferred over to using VJ software and the other tools I use today, because it's just kind of getting familiar with figuring something out on the computer.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And one other thing I think is interesting is I've always noticed that there's like really close links between electronic music and media art. They seem, I mean, to really make sense, not just to go together in their format, like as far as like a soundtrack for media art, but also the way people who make electronic music, they can really switch over to video really easily because they're dealing with technology and the idea of time. They know how to work with a timeline. Other people, I find it's a stumbling block, like say perhaps potentially like a photographer. They have to learn to deal with time and other types of technology. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the things you were doing when you were at the University of Guelph, studying contemporary art there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think where I really understood that I wanted to focus more on art that had like more animation or more video, um, was oddly in a printmaking class, and I started a series of pieces where I would take frames of video and then lay them out in a grid, and then I would print those as like silkscreen or litho prints, and then make them an animation again. I can actually pull that up. I think you'd like to see it.
Yes, please. I'm excited for your setup. I know you haven't been showing it off yet, but I'm excited for
Oh
later.
yeah, actually, we can. Should we introduce my guest?
Yeah, let's see. Pizza Cam.
Oh yes. So we have this very special pizza cam here. We can show she's resting right now. You can see that she's damp because she just gave herself a bath. But we'll just throw her in the corner here. We have our picture-in-picture Pizza the Cat cam, and yeah, people can keep an eye on Pizza, and I think that's a great way of including her in the show. Also, I had a few webcams, um, so yeah, I'll pull this guy up here. This is just share my screen.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, and so this was a lithograph print, and I wanted to really play into that, like, you know, look of a scanned print image with the CMYK color. So this is actually like 4-color lithograph process. And yeah, I think that was like where I really realized like, I'm interested in time and breaking that down, and process driven art where it's not so much about there's an input and an output and some sort of like machine or effect in between, and it's all about like just kind of running it through some sort of weird process that gets a result on the other end. And so that's something that I've done quite a bit of in my work, and VJing, I would say is very similar to that, in context, because you're taking like a PNG or some weird little graphic and then putting tons of effects on it to get a better, cooler result. Or I could put effects on my camera or my video. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. But I think where I felt the program at Guelph was a little lacking for me was on the technology side, and I really found myself wanting to just make computer work, and the extent of that at Guelph was like how to shoot and edit basic video, which I'd been doing for years at that point. So I guess it was from there that I started leaning way more into After Effects and kind of expanding my skill set that way.
Yes, yeah. Um, we're gonna show a short video of yours because I want to start talking about how you maybe started thinking about video in space from like single channel work into more installation based work. That's a big part of the focus you have right now with your the company Occupied VR that you're a partner in. We'll talk a lot more in depth about that, but. This is maybe about, I'm thinking it's about 7 years ago, you did a project for EdVideo's micro tiles, these industrial
Yeah.
display formats that EdVideo has. And this is a clip that we're seeing right now. They're set up in the window of EdVideo here in Guelph. And do you remember that project? What was it called? Refraction Interface 2, and sort of uh, the flip of the expectations. This very mysterious signal playing that looks 3D generated, but it's kind of a trick. Do you want to talk about that, and then about getting into video installation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was came out of experiments that I had done creating content for like live visuals on a stage. And I've always been really interested in light and how it bends and moves and optics. My dad being an optical engineer, and where he worked, he would bring home all these weird bits of glass, like lenses and prisms, and so I've constantly been collecting these things. And this is actually what you're seeing here is a two-way mirror foil material that you put on a window to create a two-way or a one-way window. So they put it on the outside of like skyscrapers so that the sun doesn't heat up the building. And I'm shooting that on a DSLR camera while projecting bits of light and lines through it using Resolu. So yeah, it gives the appearance that it's some very high quality rendered, light refraction texture thing, but it actually just, it took me, no time to render because I just was shooting it on a camera and then, edited the footage afterwards. And that's a technique that I've used on a number of projects to create cool content. Right now, I actually have a microscope set up with with a camera attached to it at the studio, which can't access right now. But I've been playing with shooting microscopic stuff under that as well. So yeah, I think it's always a great trick to pull. Now I've moved up to 3D and the 3D side of my knowledge that I can actually recreate all those things that you're seeing in that first piece digitally, which was kind of my goal to get to that point. So it's definitely it's cool to look back at that piece. And those tiles were cool. They're so bright and vivid as a display, and the fact that they don't just look like a TV, it just makes kind of art more impactful and stand out. Because if somebody saw it playing just on a TV in the window, I don't think it would have had the same impact. It's just like a strange shape, and you can build things out of it too. So yeah, those were a really interesting product to work with.
Yeah, we're really glad that we were able to get some funding to purchase those a number of years ago. Funny stories, they actually we had them in the window of that video in that clip we just saw, and after a few nights, some of the neighbors here in the neighborhood of the ward were, sort of complaining that they're flickering light all night long, which I kind of appreciate. I'm never upset when people have negative reactions to video, because I think about that side of it a lot. But they've been in Montreal, downtown Montreal, at Elephant Gallery for almost a year now, playing 24 hours a day
Oh,
in an environment that sort of makes more sense. We featured quite a few women artists in the last year, and so eventually we're going to get those back if we can't continue that. But it's fascinating because I too had a background in doing live visuals for bands since I guess the late 90s. And when I met you, you were also highly invested in that. But I was kind of a Luddite where I was stuck on my Rubbermaid case bin, VHS tapes, stacks of VCRs, and just like analog switchers bashing between signals. But I remember doing an event with you About 10 years ago, I was at a video and it was a Minotaur's record release um, with Kitty Ewald and Janet Johnson doing contemporary dance with an act called Brass Tacks, I think. And you showed me that night the first time I ever saw Arena. And how you do video mapping, and I was just fascinated by it. And you kind of convinced me it's time to move on into this digital realm, and so it's been. I was really appreciative of that at that time. Can you talk just a tiny bit about like doing visuals for music, and how you think about that, and how why it's exciting, and how visuals can really augment the experience of a live concert?
Yeah, I think. Well, what's funny is that the way I got started doing visuals on a regular basis was because of you. Because uh, Cadillac, Squeezy C, Leonard and I were starting a night called Cat People at Atmosphere Cafe in Guelph, and the way we convinced them that we would have a more interesting night was with live visuals. And so you lent us the projector, an old projector from Ed Video, and a Yamaha video switcher, and we did exactly that. We took like old VHS tapes of whatever movies, and I think at some point we had like a Nintendo running through it, and just played with all the weird effects and sliders on that to create like moods and atmospheres of visuals within the space. And I think that's when I even started realizing like, oh, it's cooler if you put the projector like raking across the ceiling, or like, don't worry about it me being a perfect like rectangle. Like you can really put projectors at weird angles, and thinking more about video and projection as like a really cool textured light source, as opposed to what the content really is. um and so yeah, from there I think it like got me interested in other software in that. But yeah, it wasn't until I connected with a crew in Toronto called Mansion that was throwing these electronic parties in unusual spaces. So they were throwing them in like dim sum restaurants, or warehouse parties where you have to kind of bring everything in and set up a cool atmosphere. Um, I reached out to them actually to edit videos for them. I was like, oh, I can make a cool trailer for your party, and then they're like, well, can you VJ? And I said, yes. And then I got off the call, and then I Googled best VJ software. And that's when I found Resolu, and then kind of taught myself Resolu in order to like do this first gig. And then after that, they're like, can you do projection mapping? And I said, yes. And then I went home and Googled best projection mapping software. And I actually was using a Mad Mapper back then in the beginning. Um, and yeah, from there on, it just sort of escalated. We had like not much of a budget. It was, $300 in materials, and we rent a projector or whatever, and so we'd build stuff out of foam core and put it up and project on it. And yeah, it was a great time. It was just such a great process of learning the craft, and how to like transform a space and to make something look like it was you know much more higher production value than what we were actually working with. And that's where I really cut my teeth, because I was doing, you do a party that lasts 8 to 10 hours sometimes, because they go till 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning. So those are some really long days, but that's like all that time is me just spent at a computer with a controller operating visuals live and improvising as I was going, because there was no way to pre-render, create all that content ahead of time. So a lot of it was generative, and it was just forced me to get better and better, and to learn it really well.
Well, I'd love to chat about sort of the evolution of that and your live visual career, and talk about some of your more recent large scale projects, and sort of how you went from crack copies of Arena into doing like very high production stage design with complex, more industrial equipment. I'm
Mhm.
just going to play in the background something that's from a very recent project, just from last February, before everything went into this new way of the world. Uh, it's a project in Toronto. Is it for Nuit Blanche called Isochronal from
No,
February?
so Isochronal is actually, yeah, it just happened earlier. Yeah, just a month ago now. And it was done for the Trinity Bellwoods Business Association in Toronto. And so um, I was basically submitted to their request for proposals, and was chosen alongside with my friend Graham Birdie to who composed the music, and was basically given free reign over this wall on Dundas West for 3 nights. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was like the last weekend in February where there was this crazy snowstorm. And then the next weekend it was like super warm. So we had these crazy boxes that housed the projectors, kept them safe from snow um, and all that. But yeah, the piece talks through kind of themes of cycles within matter in nature. So you start on ice, and then it goes into more of a molten liquid kind of theme, and then into more lush greenery, and then finally some particle scape stuff. So it was my first time doing a piece that was really like an outdoor projection piece at this scale, especially outside. Like Toronto, for some reason, doesn't seem to fund or really go out of its way to have these kind of projects. I was really lucky you know, to be approached by them. And my first comment was like, wow, thank you for finally being one of the people to take a chance at doing something like this. Because you go to Montreal and like there's buildings everywhere covered in projection mapping and like really incredible stuff that is such a great form of public art, because you can turn a massive empty boring wall into such an interesting thing. I know why they don't happen, because they're very expensive, and these outdoor projectors are really it costs a lot to run, and they're mounting them outdoors and getting all the permits and permissions from people. Like you see, there's 2 people that left their lights on because we were negotiating with tenants that are upstairs, and oh, by the way, you're gonna have these projections play on your closed blinds for 3 nights, the same music playing over and over. So I mean, there was a lot of like, we had to talk some neighbors and tenants into being okay with it and not like complaining to the city or whatever.
Right.
Um,
We
but
haven't.
yeah, there's these weird politics around outdoor projections that really kind of it's a miracle when they do happen. Some sort of secret sauce, or maybe more funding that's in Montreal. That's the reason that it happens more there. But I'm really not sure.
Well, I certainly noticed one of the first times I kind of really went to explore Montreal in my adult life was just about 3 years ago, and I was blown away. Within 20 minutes, I realized this is like quite easily the capital of like public projections, public media art for Canada. I was
Yeah.
incredibly impressed how much infrastructure there is for that, and how much obvious investment there is for it. But it was super exciting. We have a little quip from one of our live viewers, Nick Dembour, a Smearballs, friend of both of ours, saying that VJs are the real stars of the show. And I kind of think that's, kind of cheeky, but also very true, because, live video projections in a space are incredibly powerful and dominating. It's a amazing dynamic that artists can have to sort of almost like pee all over architecture with what they want it to be. How do you think about the technology, I suppose, for these large scale projects, and how do you sort of mediate the risk involved, especially when you're and there's like funders or supporters or other artists involved, and you're announcing it in advance as well. For me, it's like very nerve-wracking. But how do you sort of approach the whole project to feel confident that it'll work?
I mean, I'm often paired up with another technical person when the projects get to that scale. Like for instance, with the outdoor projection, I worked closely with Westbury International, um, to come and survey the site. They did the calculations of where the projectors would go and what lenses to use and all that. So, I try to delegate wherever I can so that I can focus on the creative side. Um, but none of, I'm always going to have to be worried about, my computer, the media server running well, like, these sort of things. There's a lot of moving parts that I have to be responsible for. But whenever it gets up to that scale, there's a whole crew of production, and, whether it's Westbury or some other kind of, service projector rental PA kind of stuff, then you're getting into some larger numbers of crew, and that. We did a lot of this stuff on our own when I was starting in Toronto, and I'd be getting on that ladder and rigging the projector myself and all that. But I've definitely at this point I'm more focused on larger projects with a bit more lead time and a bit more budget in terms of like being able to pull in other people to help on content and all that stuff. So yeah, there's definitely just a lot of moving parts for sure. But like the larger opportunities that I get are because it's like a music festival or something. So they already have the stage and they have a lighting setup, lighting designer, and sometimes they do something cool with an LED wall or something like that. And it's my job to kind of come in and work with the setup, the way it is. So a lot of the times I get like a stage schematic, and it's like, okay, here's all the LED walls. They're going to be in this pattern, and then I have to sort of prepare in advance how I'm going to fit my content to the stage that's been given to me. So yeah, it's rare that I'm fully in control of everything that's going to happen.
Well, could you show us some of the things that you are in control of in your setup right now? As you
Yeah.
mentioned before the show, that you're using Resolu Marina to port out your signals and have control over this Zoom meeting. Can you show us a few tricks and cool things that you can do with that besides the pizza cam?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I have other clips in here that I'm able to sort of overlay on top of me. I can always like get rid of the pizza cam. There's these different effects or pre-rendered clips that I've brought in, and I can even do fun things like there's this clip of a motion capture performance we have from a project we're working on with musician Maylee Todd.
Oh yeah.
And so this is Maylee Todd dancing in a motion capture suit. Bring up the audio too here. But I gotta move this here so she can. There we go. So yeah, I use Resolu to scale all that and put it into place. I added like a edge detection effect to it, and then I can kind of push it, or if I want it on my hand. It's all really cheap, just like controlling it with the mouse on the keyboard, but it's it's pretty fun. I also have just like some random like VJ stuff with the alpha. So pre-rendered clip that was for this is for the rap artist Bad Bunny for some world tour that he did. And yeah, so this is just like clip I happen to have on my computer here. But I can speed these things up and move them around. And Yeah, so it's a lot of fun.
Do you,
Uh,
can you tell us a little bit about the amazing motion capture suit that you have, and how Occupy VR is using that in
yeah,
new
absolutely.
ways?
I'm just gonna get Pizza a treat here so that she can, give our viewers a little bit more action. Here you go. You can get a close up on that.
We're gonna have so many viewers today from a cat cam.
That was my idea. Maybe every 10 viewers, we get Pizza gets another treat. So share out the stream, everybody. It's up to you how many treats Pizza gets. Uh, so yeah, we've got this cool suit. It's called the Rococo motion capture suit. Um, Basically, motion capture has been very expensive and hard to do for a long time because it requires something like an OptiTrack system. You're talking about like 10 to 12 different cameras in a grid in the ceiling that are shooting infrared video and light at somebody in a suit with all these little balls on it. And you can pay up to like $7,000 to $10,000 for a day of shooting on these things. It's really just made any kind of motion capture of a human body movement really expensive and hard to do. There's these new category of suits that are they're basically their sensors are built into the suit. You do a calibration and it sends all these signals over Wi-Fi to the computer, and you can wirelessly record this mocap data, and it doesn't require any external like cameras or anything. So I put on a suit, connect it to Wi-Fi, and I stand in place for a second, and then I can start acting. So we did. I can show you. This is like a little test here with Xsen's suit. It's another brand of mocap suit with the video reference in the bottom left there. This is a quick early test, and then that was exported to Cinema 4D and rendered with the Octane engine. That was the same technique we used for the robot. But what was cool is that recently we did this session remotely for another project we're working on with a company called Cream VR in Toronto. And so what you see here is a Zoom call where I'm in the top right corner. I'm wearing the mocap suit, and the director is actually on the bottom of the screens there. He's sort of telling me, giving me motions, telling me how to act, and then my colleague Brady is actually remote controlling my computer to start and stop the recording. So yeah, you can see here now as I'm moving in the top right, it's mirrored with my motions on the character. And so we were able to do this whole session remotely. I shared the files at the end of it, and Brady, who's controlling it, could log all the takes. And I think in about an hour and a half, we recorded 7 different motions that we needed for the game, and that was it. And it literally wasn't any different than if we were in the same room working on it together. Really, like we weren't limited by it. So I think that's like a really cool sign for remote production and moving forward. That I can be here in my home wearing a suit and act, you know, for a director anywhere in the world to give them control over a character.
Yeah,
Um,
that's amazing. My other friend Tim Beresford is a actor, voice talent, writer, and he's telling me
yeah.
just the that commercial video system is just like fired right back up, all using remote things. He's
Mm-hmm.
improved his home studio for audio work, and it's just like they just kind of took a few weeks off, and they figured out very quickly how to get back to work. I also am curious, like what this could mean as far as like the limits video production, or how even like the type of content might shift with people. A lot of it can still be done like you're demonstrating, but I'm also curious how it could shift with people working in isolation but then coming together on the internet as a team. Do you have any ideas about like what maybe new forms of video?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to just bring it up and show you. But there's this guy, Matt Workman, out of LA, he's a DP who has moved into really this like virtual production pipeline, and he's been slowly building up in his basement an entire work from home like virtual studio. So I'm gonna just share this here, and actually no, it's probably better like that. I got a really wide monitor. But basically, what you're seeing here is all created in this is an Unreal Engine, and what he's doing is basically he has a camera rig that's just like a normal over-the-shoulder camera rig, but it's got a tracking sensor on top of it that's from the Vive VR headsets. So it's using off-the-shelf VR tech and things like Vive trackers, which are these little. I have one around here somewhere. These little like tracking pucks. It's like part of the VR controller to know where the camera is in 3D space. So he's able to use this burst setup to orient himself around in the scene, and then he goes and he can pick up that camera that's on the tripod as a tracked camera, as if he's like actually in that scene, and he's just looking through the monitor. And like this is really the future of how a lot of content is going to be made right now. I think like you're going to start seeing TV shows or series-based kind of stuff that has this almost video game look to it. And this is the way The Mandalorian was made with giant LED screens. With like virtual sets. But people can now work, basically at home for not that much money to have this sort of new kind of setup. So I could be in a suit performing that character while somebody on the other side of the world is operating a camera and shooting it. And this is really like people are really taking this seriously in terms of like not just a test or an R&D thing, but like as a real way of working and making content. So I'm slowly building up my tool set here to do all the same stuff he's working on, and I'm a bit less space than him, but yeah, I would say that if there's one thing I'm like the most excited about in the world of production and real-time engines and all that is this really awesome way of working. So
Well, please tell us a little bit about that. I mean, one thing I've always been really impressed by is how, you're one of these people, somewhat unlike me, who is really good at staying really, really on the edge of what's possible with technology. I'm sort of at this weird mindset. Like I have this fake. Well, it's not fake, but it's Instagram account for my live visual stuff called Slop Tech, and I chose that name because I'm always about like the sloppy technology. I think it's a little bit of like the rebellion of my background as a media artist, where it's like, oh, whatever those rules are that these filmmakers have told us, like I'm gonna do the opposite, and whatever technology works is fine, and it doesn't matter about standards. And I mean, there's a certain logic there, maybe in some ways, but for other people like yourself, to really put the work in to research and learn and persevere through new types of technology, what kind of drives you to do that, even though it might be easier to just work with what you're comfortable with?
I don't know. I guess I'm really lucky that it's part of my job, as a creative director at Occupied. I'm supposed to be learning about what's new and what's current and what works really well. And, you know, when a solution comes out for any kind of effect or technique, there's always like some competitor or some, it seems like, we've definitely been hitting our heads against the wall with problems. And then, you do a bit more searching out there and somebody solved that problem for you. So, really, I'm lucky that that's, it is part of my job, but I think it's also just part of my nature that I'm curious and I enjoy learning. And in the field of visual effects and visual stuff, it's in general, uh, the technology is changing so fast, but it's also there's no real limit to like what level you can get to, like you can mess around, make some weird little blob, but I've been doing that for a long time, and now I'm like getting more and more curious about like, oh, what if I wanted to make like a really, realistic jungle scene, or make something more narrative. And so I think it's curiosity and just you know enjoying that part of like leveling up my skills. It's a good challenge for me to learn. And luckily I'm surrounded by really talented friends that share that knowledge as well. Like Nick, who's on the show and was watching, really introduced me to cinema and Octane and made me less afraid of it. And that like that's all it took for me to like go further in that direction. So I think the hardest part is choosing where to focus, because I kind of nibble at a lot of things, and I can kind of learn a small corner of the software and be comfortable with that and exploit that as an effect. But I'm rarely like mastering anything. Like I have Unity and Cinema and After Effects and Resolu and Touch Designer and now Unreal Engine that I want to learn, and it doesn't stop. So at a certain point I'm bouncing around between too many softwares. And so it's actually been good. The bit more time in isolation has allowed me to pick up something new. And I've been learning Houdini engine, which is a really complicated simulation software, but moving in the direction of making like more realistic water flow simulations and smoke and that kind of stuff. So
Well, it's always amazing to see people, doing things that are kind of totally new opportunities for people working with video, because it's like any tool set that one might have. With the wider they can expand it, the more versatile their voice is in it. But I'm also curious about how like that works psychologically. I like to talk to people who think broadly about video, about just how they think about it as a technology, perhaps in the purpose of for our viewers to like for to allow them to not take it for granted. Sometimes I think video is like a primary language, and like when you're a school child who only speaks one language in grade 3 or 4, the first time they start speaking about the grammar of your language, it's very confusing because you just intuitively understand it.
yeah.
So I'd love to really kind of blast that open a little bit and how people think about it. One thing that I was talking about with my wife Jen the other night is there's a hilarious and rich irony right now. Whereas, up until 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago, ourselves included, we're like, hey, kids, get off those screens. Don't do that. And now suddenly, our daughter Edie, who's normally here, is doing online learning modules from her school. Her dance class is doing online things. She's hanging out with her friends online. And so she's on this screen all day long. How do you think about video as far as like sort of the wonderful but potentially sort of like dangerous ways that it exists?
Yeah, I think I get asked that question a lot because I've been working in VR for 5 years now, and that's really the people consider the most insane version of the screen, because it's like literally attached to your face. I think our relationship with this, a screen or what it is and how it works has, been evolving over time. But I don't know. It we were talking a bit before we went live just about how people's relationship with communication has changed, and like, I'm video conferencing with my family a lot more than I have ever done, and I think it made me realize, like, oh, we could do this more often. It's actually like a nice way of connecting and seeing each other, and so I think we have maybe taken the tech a little bit for granted, or just didn't really understand its full value. Like, I couldn't imagine what this virus would be like if we weren't able to do stuff like this. If it happened 10 years ago, we'd be like on really bad Skype connection, and it just wouldn't work. Like, we wouldn't be able to really handle it. Like, imagine you didn't have any like delivery apps or any of that kind of stuff, or people would be in a much different position than they are now, and able to cope with isolation. So yeah, I don't know. How are you feeling about the extra screen time for your daughter?
Well, I love video, but I'm also like really cautious about it in a strange way. Like I was talking with a few days ago with the artist Tasman Richardson, and I was kind of talking about it as like a metaphor for a drug, which sounds kind of ridiculous, like an electronic drug, but I think there's something there. Whereas it's see, look at this. My screens are interrupting with my primary screens. I'm just going to turn that off. Because it is like, as just proved, like my little screen's getting in the way of my big screen right here, and then my internet screen, and it is like a drug, and it's addictive. Like, people treat it like like an alcoholic treats alcohol, where if they're, say, out and doing their thing in the day, they're like, well, at least when I get home I get to watch some Netflix or watch this movie or whatever,
Mm.
and it's extremely, extremely powerful, to the point where I think that it, as advertising shows, it's kind of immoral, because it can outpace your mind. It outpaces your eyes and your thoughts and your ears. So I'm very cautious with Edie about it. You know, because I feel like I to some degree can harness it, and I've seen the effect of it. Um, but at the same time, it is wonderful, and it's amazing, and it has incredible powers to bring people together, to share ideas, to link the world up. There's incredible things, but it's often talked about in this rhetoric that it's just wonderful all the time. A lot of people right now, if they're lucky enough to be in quarantine or isolation, they're just like talking about how much bad television they're watching. And I feel like that's like kind of a dangerous attitude to take on. It's just like, well, I've got nothing else to do. I don't want to be alone with my own thoughts or my family or my
Mm.
own talents. Like, so all I can do is watch like Full House episodes. I find that kind of a repulsive attitude that people are taking on, as if like it's a default instead of in real life activities. What do you think about this? Because I mean, you're kind of like heavily invested in, but you're also like coming up with solutions as well.
I think there's two categories, right? There's like a passive entertainment and like active entertainment. And like, I would consider like a video game, or even more so like a VR video game, completely different than like sitting on a couch and watching a Full House episode. And I do think that our relationship will change, and will kind of differentiate, I think. I mean, imagine if the you know Edie's dance class is she has to look at a screen right now, but like, if there were a future where there's some really crazy at home holographic projection device that makes a hologram of her dance teacher show up in your living room, that is basically feels like there's a person there, does that then like still feel like it's like a video, or does it maybe feel a little bit more like something's happening? I often talk about when nobody really gets out of a VR experience and says like, "Oh, that was a cool thing I saw." They say that was a cool thing I did because it's active and you're interacting with it. So like I could sit on my computer and like draw something with my mouse and feel like okay, I'm making some art, or I could put on a VR headset and like sculpt something with my hands and like really be immersed in it, and that feels like completely different, you know? It's using a different part of my brain. So I'd say I'm way less worried about people that are playing a ton of video games right now over somebody that's just watching, television, because I think that's going to keep your brain working and active, even if it is just like being a cowboy in, Red Dead Redemption, or like tending to your virtual farm and Animal Crossing. I think they are so tremendously useful for people right now. And the VR and gaming industry is getting a great boost, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I get that too. I mean, some nights I'll have a movie lined up or something, and I'm intending to watch it, but I just start doing things online that are more interactive and engaging, reading, speed reading things, jumping around, and I never get to that movie most nights because I feel like I need it to be more interactive than passive. But what do you think might be coming up? Like, what do you think the promise of video is in the world as far as like, so much hype about things with VR. I mean, your company has the letters VR right in it, and mixed reality, augmented reality, interactive things like this, streaming. Like, what do you think maybe the promise is like for video? Maybe it might be defined during these times and people are leaning heavily on it, or maybe it'll linger once the world sort of opens up in the ways that it can. Like, what are you excited about in the future of video that's on the horizon?
I think that the part of the art world that excites me the most right now are these experiential galleries, and a new type of venue for artists like myself to really shine. And that examples of that are like team labs in Tokyo, or festivals like New Tech, that feature installation art, and the Art Tech House in the States. You have artists like Rafik Anadol and Zach Lieberman, that are doing just these incredible works on their computers, but they're considered way more impactful and beautiful because they're being projected on very, very high resolution LED walls, or large surfaces, and they're filling an entire space. I think that's really the future of art, and in terms of like people going out for that interactive, they can be a part of it. And one really interesting thing is that there was this Van Gogh exhibit that was set to open in Toronto, in the old Toronto Star Plant. And obviously it was, postponed due to COVID, but they did a post this week saying they're going to be open in a month, and they're limiting the capacity to the installation. They're giving every person there 20 square feet or something like that, like 30 square feet of their own space, so that people can still go and interact with this installation, and still practice safe social distancing. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not. It seems very hopeful that they're saying that, but I think in a world where that is still going to be an issue, we're going to have to find ways of like letting people, you know, experience this kind of stuff. Um, but I don't know. I think that's the kind of part of uh, experiences right now that's got me, excited. It's the kind of thing I want to be working on, is, you know, the best quality projectors and LED walls, because without fail, every time I've worked on something, I've always, even though we've had a crazy budget or whatever, it's always like, I wish the projectors were higher resolution, or brighter, or we could have done this other thing better. So uh, it takes a company to really invest in all that. So our Art Tech House, I would say, is doing some really great stuff right now.
Yeah, indeed. I really wanted to go see their show with Marpy about a year ago, but I couldn't make it down to their Washington, D.C. location. I agree. I think that there's great potential, especially as the world opens back up for experiences of video. I mean, it's something I've been interested in since YouTube came out. Well, I remember actually Nick Denver was watching one day, said like, "There's check out this website with video. It's called YouTube." And I was like, "Well, I've seen kind of video online, but when I realized what it is, to me, it was like a revolution because it was the kind of the final step of the democratization of this medium of video that there's always like this rhetoric bandied about from my media art teachers at OCAD about it being a democratic medium, but somebody like me as the new program director at Video still had to like compile that on a VHS tape and had control over it, and suddenly this idea of experimental video was accessible to anyone. But I think that also changed this idea that people want really amazing in real life experiences of video that there's no way you can have online. And the new technology that you're invested in is sort of the way to allow that. I saw that Van Gogh exhibition or experience in Montreal, and I mean, it was awesome, but I mean, it really actually wasn't that innovative. It was just like slow
Yeah.
moving images of Van Gogh paintings. I mean, it has incredible potential for what can be done as soon as people can kind of break out of their old ways of thinking of what the medium of video ought to do. Um, so do you have any kind of final like thoughts to share about like what you're going to be working on during this time in the next few months, or what you're hoping to accomplish, or anything along those lines, Fez?
Yeah, I mean, I think just right now we're focused on some projects at Occupied VR. It's a grant season, so we're writing a whole bunch of grants, for the Canadian Media Fund, and so that's sort of a really big part of our studio and how we stay alive. And so definitely that's sort of my next couple of weeks is writing grants and proposals and putting those ideas together. Um, just on my own at home, I'm working on this, virtual production stage. So similar to that video I showed you. I don't have a green screen here, but my plan is to set up this over-the-shoulder camera rig that I can walk around a virtual scene in, and yeah, like shoot some footage of a motion captured actor, and yeah, just kind of trying to come up with new ways of working remotely through this and actually applying them to some projects, because now the grants are kind of shifting a bit, and stuff that now complies with our new social distancing rules, and is adjusting to the way that we need to work now, it is going to be more eligible. So it's really just that's been my focus in the last few weeks for sure.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you're staying busy and working towards new projects. Just wanted to really thank you. We went a little longer than we do with most guests, but I think we could have went for hours because I would love to interrogate you with more questions about what you know, what you do, and how you think about video. You've always been a big inspiration for me. And what you figured out how to do and what you're trying to do in different ways of using video. So thanks so much, Fez, and thanks Pizza, and thanks for setting up this amazing setup to demonstrate what you've got going on in your basement in East York.
Thank you, man. It's been really fun. Yeah, thank you for everyone who's watching, and yeah, if you ever have any questions about what I was talking about, hit me up on Instagram or Fezz Stenton at gmail.com, and be happy to answer any questions.
Well, that's very generous of you to do that. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for watching. If you're just joining us, that was a great chat with Fezz Stenton from Occupied VR. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show that local artist musician from Guelph, Brian Shirk, has set up a new project. It's called Love Affair Video, and it's actually streaming music and video and new things. He's getting it off the ground, and today he's embedded this show in it. Maybe we can, and you can see this at. Let's see if I can screen zoom. Loveaffair.info, a great URL. Let's see if we can go a little meta here and see if it's working. Who knows? I'm using a 10-year-old laptop. Whoa! So there's me, probably in the past, I believe, about 20 seconds. So tomorrow's a big surprise show. We're not really sure what we're gonna do. Oh, look at that! Now it's like going windows into windows into windows. Wow. I'm not really sure what we're gonna do, but I think maybe I might do a little demystifying After Effects tutorial for people. It's a really great program to use, and not too difficult to just kind of dip your toes in, like some of these programs Fezz was talking about. I think of them almost like a pool that's on a perfect incline, where you can just kind of put your toes in, or you can really dive in deep and use it in this more very complex way, but to not be intimidated by this video technology, because a lot of it's just kind of like trying it, just trying to mess around with it. I think maybe that's what we'll do. I might do an After Effects tutorial and show you how to make the type of graphics that I make for live visuals, kind of like what's behind me. Very simple, abstract, geometric graphics to just to use in different ways as backdrops for live visuals, for whatever. And I'll show you a very, very simple technique I've got to do that. That if you can get a crack copy of After Effects, or if you have the Adobe subscription, you can do these things. They take just a few minutes to do, and they're really not that difficult to do. So thanks again to Fezz. Thanks to our viewers for your comments, Nick and Liz, and for everyone who's watching either live or the archive video in the future. This is called Open Circuit. We do it weekdays, 2 p.m. from Ed Video here in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. Just talking to artists and showing their work, talking about their ideas and their thoughts behind what they do. I think we'll finish off the show right now. Just improvising here, trying to figure things out. And let's see what we've got. Just gonna do this and pull up some music. We'll cut back for a second to Love Affair Video while I do something here. And we're just trying to pull up one more of Fezz's songs, but I'm not sure if I can do it. So we're just gonna go out with a whimper today, because we're just learning as we go, figuring it out, and we'll just sign off. Thanks again, Fezz. Thanks again to everyone. Thanks to Ed Video's main funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the City of Guelph. Stay safe, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. again.